Three things are very common in our life: taxes, expenses, and interchangeable lenses. Yes, if you own an interchangeable lens camera like my A6700 or my A7 Mark IV or my Panasonic G9, then you're always on lookout for lenses to go ahead and actually up your game. It's a very common thing. You wouldn't stop with one lens. Let me promise you that. You will start off with one lens, but very soon you'll have a minimum 2 to 3 lenses as a bare minimum, like a minimalistic kit. But then on an average basis, you'll have anywhere between 5 to 10 lenses. That's the reason choosing a lens system would be really beneficial for you, so that you can actually swap those lenses across different bodies and try to create or capture content in different formats or in different mode scenes. Having said that, as you already know, I'm a heavy Sony shooter. I have two Sony cameras. I have the full frame A7 Mark IV on which I'm currently recording, along with my 16 to 35G power zoom lens, and I'm having a Sony A6700, my current pocket rocket. These two cameras support the lens mount system of Sony E-mount. Yes, it's just a single mounting system for Sony. It's called E-mount. You can either have a full frame lens on E-mount, or you can actually have an aps-c lens on E-mount. Just to tell you the power of the commonality of having a single mounting arrangement for lenses translates to approximately 245 Sony E-mount lenses in the market. Just imagine that, 245 lenses. And I might be a bit off by, 10 to 20 on the lower side. You might actually have a bit more lenses than what I'm actually stating as. Now, having said that, not all of these lenses can be your everyday carry lenses. An everyday carry lens is something that always stays on your camera, like your A6700. You would just pick it up along with that lens and start shooting. There are only around 10 to 15 lenses. Yeah, only 10 to 15 lenses in this entire Sony E-mount ecosystem that qualify to be an everyday carry lens. In this video, I'm going to share with you the everyday carry lens that I've actually bought for my A6700, and I'm using it on a daily basis. This lens is actually bought by my own coin. It's not sponsored by anyone, but if you'd love to sponsor this video, please go ahead and use the contact details below to reach out to me. If you'd give a like or subscribe, that will be an awesome sponsor for me still. A like and subscribe absolutely count. I would like to get monetized on this channel, currently around 160 plus subscribers. So it will be really great if you can subscribe to my channel, because 90% of my viewers haven't yet subscribed on my channel. So yeah, a sub would be really awesome. The main criteria I was looking for is the weight and the focal length. Because it's an everyday carry lens and because it's going to be always mounted on my A6700 as a default, I would like it to be as light as possible. But at the same time, I didn't want to compromise on my focal length, because I need it to be as wide as possible so that I'm able to capture the entire environment behind, but at the same time have some kind of a decent zoom in it, so that in case in particular scenarios we would like to zoom in and take photos like of the food that I'm trying to eat, or a portrait for picture, then I should be able to go ahead and zoom it. The next criteria I'm actually having is to have a little bit faster aperture value. We have 1.7 or 1.4 that everyone would love, but then at that time I'm only stuck to a prime lens. I would basically prefer to have a zoom lens, even if it is from the wider angle to a slightly wider angle. Say for example, anywhere between a full frame equivalent of 16 to 18 to all the way up to 35-40 millimeters. That's where I was actually looking for as a base one, and I'm happy even to have a f2.8 lens. The reason being is f2.8 lens, although is not as fast as a f1.7 or f1.2 in low light scenarios, it's still decent enough as a combination with my A6700, which does a pretty good decent job in low light. If you would like to see how well an A6700 performs in low light condition with a f1.7 lens versus a f2.8 lens, please subscribe to this channel, as there is going to be an upcoming video in the next month on that. So while looking for this lens, the other criteria I'm actually having is to go ahead and capture the vibe and the environment out there and not be fiddling around with the settings, because the emphasis here is to capture the memory or convey the story rather than trying to sit there and fiddle about settings on my camera lens or the camera itself and miss the movement. Considering all these requirements, I have actually selected the Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 lens. Yes, this is a constant aperture f2.8 zoom lens between 11 to 20 millimeters of aps-c range. It actually translates to 16.5 to 30 millimeters of full frame equivalent. The reason being, it's not that heavy lens. It weighs only around 335 grams or 11.8 ounces. And in terms of length, it's roughly around 82.6 millimeters or 3.4 inches for the Sony version. The Fujifilm version is 86.5 millimeters or 3.4 inches, Either way, you actually are trying to look at it. So that's basically the distance from here all the way actually up to here. So this is the lens hood and this is on the backside cap. I put a Hoya UV filter on it. That's by default for me. At the 11 millimeter or full frame equivalent of 16.5 millimeters focal length, that's where you see the amount of protrusion up here. So if you're using a gimbal, it's better to actually balance it when you are somewhere between 14 to 16 millimeters, so that either you're on the 11 or 20 millimeters, your balance is not gone. I have DJI RS3 Mini, which I use to go ahead and balance this one on, and the length at 11 millimeters of focal length is around 86.2 millimeters. Now what this focal length translates to is the minimum distance to go ahead and actually focus is around 0.15 meters or 5.9 inches at the widest, that is at the 11 millimeters APS-C focal length, and at the tele, that means 20 millimeters APS-C focal length or 30 millimeters full frame focal length, it is around 0.24 meters or 9.4 inches. So your minimum focusing distance would actually vary between 0.15 meter and 0.24 meters. In terms of magnification, at the widest, that means at 11 millimeters APS-C focal length, it's around 1:4, whereas on the tele end, it's around 1:7.6. So what does that all mean when you're trying to capture content or your memories? So on the wider 11 millimeter APS-C focal length, you'll be able to capture an entire environment behind your subject or your loved ones, because that's equivalent to 16.5 millimeter full frame equivalent, whereas on the narrow one, that is the 20 millimeter APS-C focal length, which translates to 30 millimeters full frame equivalent, you're able to shoot some cool photos of yourself or actually of your loved ones or of your friends in terms of portraits. At the same time, you'll be able to take a very good close-up photos of the food or some interesting objects around you. The second reason is it's a f2.8 lens. Yeah, it's a f2.8 aperture lens. It's not a f1.4, it's not a f1.7, or it's not a f1.2. That's fair enough, but it's decent enough for me because as I pair it with my A6700, for most of the scenarios that I actually capture content on or capture my memories on, f2.8 has always been plenty and good enough for me. In fact, most of the time I shoot my content anywhere between f4 to f5.6 to ensure a good amount of focus of the area is actually out there. Typically, if I'm capturing outdoors, I would keep it anywhere between f8 to f11. And if I'm only taking very specific portrait pictures or a specific, dish photograph that I really love, that's when I actually come down to f4, very rarely f2.8. In that case, getting f2.8 is much more advantageous for me when compared to my f4 lenses. At the same time, if I'm having a f2.8, one added advantage always is that in case of cozy atmospheres or places which are not really actually having well lit, like inside of a church or in a corner of a restaurant or on a overcast day, the f2.8 will happily help me along with the ISO range there in my A6700 to pull through the awesome content that I want to get. So this is my default configuration for my A6700. Always I actually have the A6700 and the Tamron 11 to 20 millimeters there. So whenever I want to go out and capture any content, these are there by default. It's very easy to mount on it. You have a white line up here, you have a white dot up here. You would just align these dots and then just give it a good solid twist. There we go. That's it. You have a click sound. That means it is solidly fit into the mounting bracket. All I need to do is just to switch it on, and that's it. Voila! Camera on, autofocus, perfectly fine. I can go from 30 millimeters all the way up to 11 millimeters or 16.5 millimeters full frame equivalent. As you can see, this is the level of zoom that's available at an object which is roughly 50 to 100 mm actually away from where my lens hood is. And this is how I actually carry. Obviously, I have a peak design, easy slide in, slide out kind of a tag, and I actually have a hand rope thing that I try to do. And it always stays on this one. I do have a small rigs half cage actually on it, and this helps me to go ahead and capture content in wherever actually I would like to do, whether it's in a restaurant, whether it's actually outside. As this is a f2.8 constant aperture lens, it can also work as a multiple focal lens prime lens. I'm not kidding. You can use this as a 20mm f2.8 prime lens because f2.8 is a constant aperture here. You can then use it as an 18mm f2.8. You can use it as a 16mm f2.8, 14mm f2.8, or 11mm aps-c focal length f2.8 prime lens. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is in a quirky way 5 prime lenses in one, but at an f2.8. f2.8 is actually plenty to capture content. As I was saying, the filter threading diameter for this lens being Tamron is 67 millimeters. That's the cool thing about Tamron. All their interchangeable lenses for cameras actually have a 67 millimeter filter threading. So if you buy one, you can keep swapping them across lenses. You could buy as expensive as a Polar Pro, or if you're someone like me, you would buy a newer or something a bit cheaper. Now let's dive a little bit deep into the technical specs of this lens. So if you look into what is the optical construction inside the lens is actually made up of 12 elements in 10 groups. You have the molded glass as spherical element, you have the XLD or E extra low dispersion element, and you actually have the ELD or low dispersion lens element. This particular lens for the Sony E mount was actually launched on June 24, 2021. So you'll actually have that number being written on it. The minimum aperture that it can actually go to is f16, and the maximum aperture it can actually go to is f2.8. It has around 7 circular diaphragm aperture blades to go ahead and function for the opening and closing of the aperture. The angle of view for this aps-c frame mirrorless format is between 105 degrees on the wider side, that is the 11mm aps-c side, whereas on the 20mm aps-c side, on the narrower side, it's around 71 degrees. The lens outer is actually coated by fluorine coating. The fluorine coating is a highly durable protective fluorine compound that is water and oil repellent, which is pretty good handy. But I would always advise you to put a UV filter on top of it, or at least a lens hood, so that you're not damaging your lens. As this is an RXT lens, it would be having the rapid extra silent stepping drive. That means a stepping motor unit for high speed and high precision autofocus. You would be listening to a little bit of sound when you're trying to actually focus, but that is something that you can actually ignore. It's not a huge amount of sound that I get in my Sigma 56mm f1.7, but it's a small amount of sound. The focusing is pretty quick. If you are interested in seeing a focusing demo or a focusing test of this particular lens, please do comment below. And this is one of those Tamron lenses that come with their BBAR G2 coating, which basically stands for, it's a mouthful, let me show you that, Broad Band Anti-Reflection Generation 2 coating, which is an innovating coating technology that prevents ghosting and flare. All in all, I would definitely recommend this lens for people having an A6700 or one of the mirrorless cameras aps-c range from the Sony side, or if you're having the Fujifilm side of aps-c mirrorless cameras, this is a very good tool to actually have in your tool bag, that is your lens bag. Some of the other lenses that I've actually compared and have very come close to buying when I was trying to purchase this lens was the Sony 10 to 18 millimeters f4 lens, as well as the Sigma 18 to 50 millimeters f2.8 lens. At the time of trying to purchase this in 2024 in Australia, I couldn't find those other two lenses to rent out and try. I was only able to get the Tamron lens. It basically did everything that I asked and expected it to do. Hence, I'm very proud to go ahead and buy it with my own coin. Comment below your favorite everyday carry lens and camera combination. And if you're someone like me who creates content for small businesses on travel as well as food, then please do comment below your favorite combination of lens and camera that you're actually trying out as of now. Would you like to consider the Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 and an A6700 combination? And if you think there is a better combination, I would love to go ahead and try that out. Until the next video, take care, stay safe, peace.